Welcome in, everybody, to the ClutchFans Live post-game show. Rockets get a win, 104-86 in Atlanta, the second game of a back-to-back for both teams, actually. A very short-handed Atlanta Hawks team, yet by the same token, Rockets were missing Tari Eason and Dorian Finney-Smith. But Rockets used a second-half surge, close game throughout up until that mid-third quarter, and they just kind of pulled away from the Hawks and turned into a rout. Like I said, 104-86. Kevin Durant continues to feast as he's been essentially the MVP for this team. 12 of 22 from the field, 31 points, and got a lot of contributors in this game as well. I'm here with Ben DuBose. You can follow him on Twitter at Ben DuBose. Read his stuff on Rockets Wire, on USA Today, and on Clutch Fans as well. Ben, I'm curious your thoughts in this game. Obviously, this wasn't the greatest test. This wasn't the San Antonio game, but it's a good win.
Yeah, absolutely. Night two of a road back-to-back, the way the Rockets started the season in these situations, you certainly shouldn't complain about it. I think at the end of the day, this is a game that one team had Kevin Durant, the other didn't, and ultimately that's what won the day. I mean, Kevin, the shape he keeps his body in at 37 years old is phenomenal to be able to deliver like this on night two of back-to-backs. I can't help but think back to last month. It's a fascinating thought exercise. 1 month ago, we were talking about the lack of consistency and the highs and the lows. The Rockets had all these big wins, but they had the awful losses to teams like the Kings, the Pelicans, the Trailblazers. And now it feels like they're taking care of business on these night two of back-to-backs. This is their third straight win. The effort seems much more professional, yet the disconcerting thing last night against the Spurs and obviously the Thunder game a couple of weeks ago, you've had two games recently against upper echelon competition in which the Rockets offense just wasn't good enough. So the professionalism, it's a lot better right now. But I guess the mid to late January Rockets, the concerns are back as far as is this offense without Fred VanVleet going to be good enough to contend for a championship? And so which version would you prefer? It's a fascinating thought exercise, but for me, I think I prefer this version, especially because, you have had some big wins. You did beat the Spurs last week. You beat the Pistons last week. And if you're going to ultimately fix the problems with this team, you at least need to start with the right spirit. You need to start with the right competitive fire. And for this team to go out and take care of business against a undermanned Hawks team, I know the Rockets were a little bit undermanned themselves, but they're playing with the right respect for the game. And I think that's where you've got to start. Like there's some problems, especially offensively, that in the aftermath of this first game, they've got to iron out. But at least in contrast to December, this current version of the Rockets seems to be taking the games much more seriously. And I think in the interim, that's something to celebrate, even if there are bigger challenges ahead.
Yeah, KD tonight, boy, just made some really, really big shots. As I mentioned, 12 of 22. And I think you summed it up nicely. The Rockets had KD, they did not. They're missing Jalen Johnson tonight, obviously missing Porzingis, who's been out, Okongwu, who's been playing really well. They came in, the Hawks did, with a 4-game winning streak. Okongwu was averaging 18 points in those 4 games. He had some sort of issue, got hit. I lost a tooth something with Jaylen Brown last night in Boston. So he was out in this game. So it was basically CJ McCollum, Alexander Walker, those guys. So they were missing some firepower, definitely, but I still love the way the Rockets responded. And again, KD deserves all the flowers because this guy is, when we have a bunch of players on this team that struggle here and there, obviously we saw Jabari. Reed has been struggling up until the second half tonight a little bit. Sengun, last couple of games, really struggling. KD, for the most part, has been consistent. He's had some bad games here and there shooting wise, but it's just so deadly with that jumper. It's such an asset. And I don't want, we'll talk a little bit about the trade here, the trade stuff at the end today, but it's such a tough balance with looking at what
Right.
KD can do for you right now versus you've lost Steven Adams, you've lost Fred VanVleet. It's very hard to fill those things. What do you do at the deadline? We'll talk about that for sure. A few other players tonight. I want to talk about Jabari Smith Jr. going back to his hometown, Atlanta tonight. Just 5 of 12 from the field, 2 of 6 from 3. Nothing that jumps off the page there, but did have a career high 5 blocks tonight, 3 steals as well. Was very active, 8 boards, and a plus 15 for the team. I thought it was a really good game for him. He missed a couple shots that I shook my head going, no, Jabari, that's just frustrating. Maybe an open 3, but had the nice drive where he kind of went right and fed Capella for the alley-oop, something we don't see often from him.
Yep.
Had a transition, put the ball on the floor and blow past his guy for a dunk, that you don't see very often from him as well. I just thought he was active. Maybe it was part of, going home and his family being there, but Jabari had a good game today.
Yeah, absolutely. Both Jabari and Reed had 5 made shots and multiple made three-pointers, and that just goes so far to relieving the pressure on Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun. Sengun did not have an efficient shooting night, although I think you have to put an asterisk on this one. He was questionable going in today with the ankle sprain, which he seemed to re-aggravate against the Spurs. I think he was gutting it out because this Rockets team, especially the way last night ended, blowing a 16-point lead and losing by double digits, this would have been a bad one to lose, and I think Sengun just wanted to give it whatever he had to get them this win, and they're coming home for Dallas on Saturday night, and they'll reevaluate in the next 24 hours, I'm sure. Tonight, they got the win. That's what matters, and when you have this version of Jabari and Reed that is able to make some shots, including threes, it does so much to space the floor. I mean, we talk about the way the Spurs, and I do think, some of the issues in the second half against the Spurs, people ask the question, why doesn't every team defend the Rockets the way the Spurs did with the 5 just sort of sagging off a men and defending the rim? Well, every team doesn't have Victor Wembanyama. Like, that strategy is a lot more effective when the guy that's sagging off and trying to hedge is 7'5" and athletic freak, maybe the biggest in the history of the NBA, and is able to recover in ways that most teams can't. But I do think, to the larger point, this team does need more spacing. And so when Jabari and Reed are able to make shots and space the floor, it does so much to let the big guns operate. And even if Sengun couldn't tonight, KD could. And against an undermanned Hawks team, it was enough. I also think we should point out defensively, I believe 86 points was the lowest the Rockets have held an opponent to all year. So this is a culture win, and that's what I keep going back to, and I think there's a lot of positives to take in that regard. There are some offensive questions that this team needs to resolve, but to hold any opponent to 86 points, especially on the road, I don't care if it's night 2 of a back-to-back, you're playing hard. You're playing together. I thought Clint Capela looked really good in his minutes with rebounding and rim protection. I just think overall, if you're going to fix the Rockets this year to where they have any chance at all to make some noise and contend for a championship, you've got to get back to the formula from a year ago defensively. That's what this team does at its best. That's what Ime Udoka has become known for over his time in the NBA. Fix the defense, and then let's hope that as the weeks progress, maybe they get Fred VanVleet back in some capacity before you get to April. Let's hope that the offense, as the season moves along, can start to put this together. It's got to start with defense, and on that side, I think it's looked better in recent games. They haven't had the lapses against bad opponents that they did in December, and I thought tonight specifically, that's something that the Rockets can hang their hat on. They seem to really respond. This team needed a win, and it started with defense, and really from the outset, this is one of their better efforts in a while.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Spurs game. I don't want to change subject. We'll come right back to the Hawks game, but I did watch the second half, or I should say the entire third and some of the fourth of the Spurs game before I went in there tonight. And the Rockets lost that lead with Luke Cornett on the floor. Wemby was gone. They had an 11-point lead in the third quarter. It got wiped out with Cornett and Keldon Johnson, who was guarding Sengun at that point in time. I think Amen was even off on the floor for a stretch. Now the fourth quarter was what we saw. So we can definitely talk about those points. But another thing to throw out there, Stephen Castle and Dylan Harper both can't shoot either. They're both really struggle to shoot from 3-point range. They're not as bad as Amen Thompson, but they're both in the 20 percentile, 24%, 25%, really bad. So it's something that they're going to have to figure out. I mean, the issues with Sengun, Amen on offense, and the issues with Sengun, Reed on defense are topic for another day, but that is a long-term concern, no matter how you look at it. We'll talk about Sengun some more later. Reed Shepherd tonight couldn't make anything in the first half. And this is a story we've said many times, Ben. Like, Reed, first half, not good. Reed, second half, good. Tonight, I think he was 0 for 3 in the first half from 3-point range. I think he was 1 for 8, maybe, from the field. Ended up going 4 for 6 from the field, hit 3 threes in the second half. I think he was 3 for 4. So he had a much better second half, Reed tonight. And his connection with Capela seems to be legit. Like, Reed and Capela have something going on. It's really a nice fit because Capella's that brings that better rim protection. He's a little bit older, but he is, a known rim protector. That helps Reed certainly on the back line of defensively, and then he's got a lob threat. We're going to use that term from the Silas days, but he's got a lob threat in Clint as well. So I'm liking what I'm seeing from Reed and Clint.
Yeah, let's talk about Clint because I don't think he played in the second half against the Spurs. Is that right? If he did, it was like
I,
token minute.
I believe he did not, but I can't say if he came in for a few minutes or not. I didn't see him play specifically, but I need to go back and double check.
And so I think this is something that with Steven Adams out for the year, which has a few implications, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes when we talk about the trade deadline implications. Trade deadline is 1 week from today. But Clint tonight, 10 points, 7 boards, 2 assists, 2 blocks in 18 minutes. Rockets plus 17. They were plus 17 with Capela, plus 5 with Sengun. That's not me throwing shade at Sengun. I acknowledge he was definitely playing hurt tonight, but it does show that Capela lifted them in his minutes. And yet it feels like even when Steven hasn't played this year, Capela has largely played token minutes. He's been the backup center in the first half, but if Steven isn't available in the second half, typically they'll do a combination of extended Sengun minutes and small ball Jabari at the 5. And what I'm wondering after tonight, is this a point where the Rockets should give Clint Capela a longer runway? I did some checking in today, and folks inside the building will tell you, like, Clint has much more gas in the tank than people on the outside thought going into this year. Like, they are really impressed with physically how his body looks and what he's still able to do at 31 years old, now in his second decade in the NBA. What I heard internally is that Clint still needs to get better at learning the playbook and what the expectations are for the Rockets. He hasn't been here in the Ime Udoka era. So in contrast to some of his teammates that have been in the system for a while, this is all new terminology, a new system for Clint. And so in the super high leverage minutes, Ime is still learning to trust Clint. But I'm wondering if now with Steven out and Jabari, he played better tonight, but it's been a bad month for Jabari overall.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is this a point in which Ime Udoka may have no choice but to rip the Band-Aid off and trust Clint Capela a little bit more? Because athletically, Dave, he looks good. Like he's a lob threat, as you mentioned. He protects the rim. I think he has some synergies with Reed that help mitigate his deficiencies on the defensive end. Reed, that is. Like, I know it's not easy for a coach like Ime Udoka. Someone mentioned defensively, the Rockets not having the personnel this year that Ime wants. Maybe not tonight, but I do think moving forward that with Tari and DFS, the Rockets, maybe it's not quite as much as a year ago, but they've got some defensive pieces. And I think Clint, with the rim protection, the athleticism, can fit into that as well. It's just to this point, at least as I understand it, the Rockets have been a little hesitant to play him high leverage minutes because he's still getting used to the terminology, the new team, what his responsibilities are as the back line of this defense. I'm wondering now with Steven Adams out, like these are not bit minutes anymore. Steven is not coming back.
Yeah, right.
So is this the time that, you're midway through the year, you have 2.5 months until the playoffs, that you just rip the Band-Aid off and don't make Clint Capela the part-time backup center, making the backup center in each half. Give him 15 plus minutes per game because athletically he looks the part. He looks really good. He was a huge part of their success tonight. They haven't really
18
trusted him
minutes.
in these big games to this point. Maybe it's time they do.
Yeah. 4 for 4 tonight, as you pointed out, plus 17, 18 minutes for Clint Capela. Looked really good tonight. So, yeah, he's so far filling the role of Steven Adams. A little bit different. Obviously, he's better, I think, a little bit better rim protector than Adams. Adams is an elite screen setter, elite offensive rebounder. Capela's pretty darn good himself, but Adams is another level. Yeah, I think you might be right. I think you got to start playing Clint, and I think especially in those Reed minutes.
And
Reed,
also, if Sengun has an off night, or if God forbid he needs another week or two off to rest that ankle, you need another legit body at center. Like if Sengun needs to shut it down for a while, and I'm not saying that's the case now, but when you see him having repeated issues with the same ankle, you do have to worry about that. I don't think we're anywhere near a point in which you want to make Jabari Smith a full-time 5. Like, I do not think that would go well right now, especially with the other elements of his game all suffering in recent weeks. So just as far as a hedge for Sengun, if he's having a bad night or if he gets hurt again, then I think there's a lot of value in having Clint, if you need him ready to play 25, 30 minutes. I'm not saying that they should play him 25, 30 minutes on Saturday night against Dallas, but if you want to potentially have him available for that down the road, then maybe you need to start consistently playing him for 15 to 20.
Yeah, well, I'll say I wish Sengun had sat tonight, to be honest with you. I don't know if he's if he's dealing with this ankle or not, but I mean, it was obvious from the get-go, 7-0 Hawks right out of the gate, and there were at least 2, just bad defensive plays by Sengun where he just looked slow. And, Koloko and, Mohamed Gay, I believe is how you say it, did a really good job just being very physical with him. Now, they're not giving them the whistles as often, they're definitely, pushing on him and everything, but he couldn't make bunnies at all tonight. 3 for 14 from the field. He did get some offensive boards, which is great. I think he had 7 tonight, 13 total rebounds, and he did have 3 blocks, but this was not a good Sengun game at all. As a matter of fact, I think he had 7 points at half. He must have scored just 2 in the first half or in the second half, excuse me. But anyway, he had a rough second half against the Spurs and now this. So I don't know if it is an ankle thing or not. He just came off of a 15-17 game against Memphis. So we'll see how this plays out. And the Rockets play again on Saturday. Josh Okogie, we want to talk about him. I thought he was brilliant tonight. Hit threes, 3 of 5 from deep, but 7 offensive rebounds, a career high, as pointed out on the broadcast. I think his previous career high in offensive boards was 4. Okogie just brought the effort tonight, and I thought he made a significant impact.
Yeah, Okogie, Capella, Jayshawn Tate all played 18 plus minutes. We talk about wanting to see the Rockets take the games more professionally and have the defensive effort more consistent. When 3 guys of your top 8 in the rotation are those 3, it's going to be pretty hard not to. And so it starts with Okogie. We've mentioned in recent shows that his minutes have been on the way up for a while. But yeah, when you have his energy on the floor flying around, and then you supplement that with guys like Tate and Capella, who always play hard in their minutes, and obviously Amin Thompson is a top shelf defensive player every night, you just have so many above average defensive pieces out on the floor that guys who might otherwise fade in the background or say, well, it's night 2 of a back to back, I don't have the legs. You're less likely to do that if you're going to stand out like a sore thumb, if you're the weak link in the chain. And so I think, especially in this situation, night 2 of a split back to back, Josh Okogie, Clint Capella, Jayshawn Tate, let's give them their flowers because they set a standard that I think your guys like Reed Shepherd and Jabari Smith Jr. that can go either way at times with their effort. We talked Jabari during his shooting slump and the impact that's had, at least in the metrics, on his defense. That's less likely to happen when you're playing with guys like Josh and Jason that are flying around.
Let's talk, we don't need to go super long tonight. Obviously, this wasn't the greatest matchup for these two teams, but I want to talk to you about the trade stuff. We talked a little bit about it yesterday with Adam Spolane, who joined me, but the Kobe White rumors are out there. The trade deadline, I believe, is February 5th coming up. I'd love to hear what your thoughts on that, but in general, but also just what you think they, not necessarily specifics, but could be looking to do as they get closer to the deadline, given you've lost Adams for the year. And, Fred may or may not come back. And if he does, is he going to be, giving you much? So you've got maybe a need at center, maybe a need at point guard. What do you think?
Yeah, I've done some digging, and I think the Kobe White scenario is unlikely. I think there's sort of a game of telephone there. There was one somewhat valid report out of the Chicago Sun-Times, and then a bunch of what I would call engagement bait accounts on Twitter that ran with it.
Aggregators, yeah.
I think, I'm not going to throw shade at the original reporter, but I do think the Rockets are a classic team that's going to get used for leverage, and that there's a narrative out there that this team needs a point guard, and everyone knows they have a 37-year-old Kevin Durant in all NBA form, so it's easy to connect the dots. And if you're trying to sell a guard, say, oh, the Rockets are conceivably interested. In the case of Kobe White, I don't think they view him as a point guard along the lines of Fred VanVleet. I think they see a lot of overlap similar to guys they already have on the roster like Kevin Durant and Reed Shepherd. And so there's just not enough of a distinguishing factor when it comes to Kobe White for it to be worth what it would take to get him in the trade, especially given the contractual uncertainty. The only reason the Bulls are considering trading him is because he's an unrestricted free agent this summer. And there was a a tweet, I forget who it was, but I read a tweet today that summed it up well. Someone made the case the Rockets shouldn't decrease their odds next year from 20% to 10% to take their odds from 5% to 10% this year. And I don't know if those numbers are anywhere close to accurate, but I do think the overarching point is a good one. It's not just about this season. The Rockets have talked over and over again about building a sustainable contender. And the
Mhm.
reason they acquired Kevin Durant, it wasn't just because, oh, we've got to acquire Kevin Durant. As much as people say, well, he's 37-year-old and he's great. How long is his prime going to last? The Rockets acquired him because it was at a low price point to where they could fit him in with their existing young core and he could help the development. And maybe they win a title or contend for a title in the interim. But that wasn't, it wasn't a truly win now move. It was to help them move forward in the process, but it wasn't title or bust is the way that I would put it. They went for KD because he fit within their existing core and the timelines. And so they're not going to go out of their way unless it's a move that truly moves the needle. And what I mean by that is, a trade for Kobe White or any salary of significance, the Rockets are hard capped at the first apron. So they have to send out close to as much money as they take in. Well, who are they sending out? It's not easy to send out Clint Capela anymore because there's no Steven Adams. So if you want to win a title, you need at least two reliable centers. So Clint's suddenly much more important.
Well, I will say people are suggesting Adams, and I don't agree with it, but I'm saying that's yeah.
Yes, and that's the other point. If it's not Capella, then I see a lot of Fred, Steven, or Dorian Finney-Smith used as matching salary. And I said this with Fred early in the year, and I'll say the same thing with Steven and DFS. Even though DFS is playing, he's basically, I'd say like a partial participant at this point because he's clearly limited coming off the ankle injury. The Rockets believe in these guys long term. In October, the Rockets fully believe that all three of those guys, Fred, Dorian, and Steven, are going to be full participants in training camp. They're 32 years old or younger, and they are going to be good rotation players next season. Now, you can say assuming health, but that's quite literally true of any NBA player. So, from the Rockets' perspective, any move they make, as far as moving one of those guys for a Kobe White or anyone else that gets brought up, it would be just for this season. Going into next season, they feel good about their rotation. Like you add Fred, Steven, and a 30 minutes per game version of Dorian Finney-Smith to what you have now, you already have a full rotation. So any upgrade you make would just be about this season. And so for it to be worthwhile to use one of those pieces as matching salary, it needs to really move the needle. I just don't think Kobe White does. He's a nice player, but you know, it wasn't even sure before. Let's go back to September 15th. Even before Fred VanVleet tears his ACL, I don't think it was a given that the Rockets were at the tier of Oklahoma City. We were hopeful if they could give it, a nice run and the Rockets would be, in the ball game, so to speak. But even when they were believed to be at full health, and we didn't know about the Dorian Finney-Smith injury at that point either, it was still a little bit of a heavy lift. Now you take out not only Fred, but also Steven. Are you really convinced, Dave, that you add Kobe White and this is a team that can beat Oklahoma City 4 times out of 7? I'm not. Like, I don't mean that to be pessimistic. I just think that's reality. Now, maybe you get lucky and KD has like a historic run, or maybe the Thunder or whoever you play has, some ill-timed injuries that help you out. I mean, yeah, it's possible. Like, I'm not saying the Rockets can't win a title, but what I'm saying is that you don't acquire a Kobe White and then say this is a championship level team.
Right.
It would make you better, but I still think there would be some clear deficiencies. And again, with Kobe, I don't think they really view him as a Fred VanVleet type. He's closer to, guys they already have on the roster in terms of role. He's closer to a two guard, and the Rockets already feel pretty good at that position with how they use Kevin Durant and Reed Shepherd. So I just think
Okay.
they've got to consider not just this season, but next season. And if the only upgrade is for this year, and you're already down two key rotation players in Fred and Steven, so your odds are already diminished, is it really worth it if you have to take away a key player from next season's team? That's what I keep coming back to.
Yeah, I mean, they have to keep long term in mind for sure. The player that kind of I think it's very difficult. I don't see it being possible, but I think could actually really help them is a Jrue Holiday type, a significant leader type, a Mike Conley in his prime. Obviously Fred VanVleet if they could get him back. Somebody like that could stabilize the team a little bit more. I love seeing Amen develop, and I think Reed. I like seeing that happen. I think that's what's going to be a key focus the rest of the way. But that's kind of what the type that I think it would take. I don't look at Kobe White, as good as he is. He's a good scorer. I don't see that being the game changer for them, and I don't think that
He's not
I
a
don't think
point
they're
guard. Like,
right.
acknowledge that at point guard along the lines of Fred VanVleet could help them. I just don't think Kobe White is that guy.
Yeah. I want to ask you about Giannis too. We've talked about it a lot, I know, but the report came out, Tim McMahon saying Rockets are just saying we're as patient as ever. I'm surprised by it. Obviously, we have both talked, to different people with the Rockets in the past. I know they had interest in Giannis pre Kevin Durant that summer. It didn't come to fruition as far as him even being available. I am a little thrown off by this, but I did point this out yesterday to Adam. There's a tweet out there from Mark Stein and from other sources a year ago today, more or less, just before the deadline, of saying the Rockets are not interested in Kevin Durant. They are patient. They want to see what this team looks like in the playoffs, and I think that's what they want to do. They want to give this team a shot and then make adjustments in the summer. So if you want Giannis on the Rockets, if that's what your view is, I think you got to hope he does not get traded at this deadline, and he's an option in the summer. But it throws me off, man. I'll let you speak, because I feel like the Rockets, their philosophy has been these type of guys don't come on the block very often. Sure, you get a Jimmy Butler, you get other stars, but Giannis is a superstar, a top 3, top 4 player in the league. Yes, he's dealing with a couple of calf injuries that are scary this year, but you don't get these guys very often. And so I'm a little thrown off by it, to be honest.
Yeah. I will say it's a little different than the Luka scenario from a year ago in that Luka was 25. If Giannis was 25, they take the talent and worry about everything else later. To go from a 23-year-old Alperen Sengun or a 22-year-old Amen Thompson, although I don't think Amen's on the table in any scenario. I think
Nope.
he's as untouchable as it gets. For a 31-year-old Giannis, I mean, that's a big age gap. And in a perfect world, I think the Rockets, just philosophically, and some people will disagree, but I think the Rockets would rather have, a 10-year window of, a pretty good chance every year than a 2 or 3-year window with a very good chance, simply because they've learned the hard way. So many things can go wrong. We saw this in 2018. You can have an all-time team and you can have one of your star players pull a hamstring at the worst moment, and then it all goes south. And so I think this team, especially in the aftermath of what happened early in the Tillman Fertitta ownership tenure, is very cognizant of keeping that window open as long as possible. And the idea is that some years the bounces will go your way, the health gods will smile upon you, however you want to frame it. The idea is that the longer window gives you more bites at the apple. And I think that's something that under Tillman Fertitta, under Rafael Stone, the Rockets have consistently prioritized. With that said, we did see, a lot of what shifted last year with KD was the Suns' asking price came down, and I'm skeptical that the Bucks will see their asking price come down to nearly the same extent with a 31-year-old Giannis. But you do have to note Giannis this summer will be 1 year from when he can become a free agent. And so that gives him a lot of control. And so it's not unfathomable that maybe he can, depress his market enough between being 1 year from free agency and coming off multiple calf strains. Maybe his market is, a lot less than you would normally think for a player of his caliber, one of the 3 or 4 best in the world. So I agree with you. I don't think it's going to happen by the trade deadline, but I'll teach
In general, you don't think he'll be traded, period?
Well, no, I don't think it's happening with the Rockets.
Oh, yeah, no,
Traded
no,
by
yeah.
the trade deadline, but I'm agreeing with you that, the hope is that if I was to rank it, I would say I hope he doesn't get traded anywhere, because I would love to keep the door open. And then secondly, I would want him to get traded to, Miami
Miami.
or an
Yep.
Eastern Conference team. And then the worst case scenario is he gets traded now, but he goes to, a Golden State, a San Antonio, somewhere like that.
Minnesota. What a disaster that would be for us, I think.
Yeah.
If he gets traded to Minnesota, and Windhorst
Another
today,
team that goes to the top tier.
yeah, I mean, Windhorst, one of the most credible there is out there, saying there's real smoke to that he wants to play with Anthony Edwards. It's like, man, that would not, I don't know if they could pull that off. They don't have like these, slew of picks. And so Milwaukee's going to have to want, a Randall or Naz Reid and Jaden McDaniels, those type of players. But if they could pull that off, that's pretty scary. That impacts us. So Miami, best case scenario, if he does get traded.
And to preview one of our upcoming shows, we've got Michael Shapiro of Cron.com coming on, I believe, Monday, which will be about 72 hours before the deadline, or really about 60 hours. So I think it's midday on Thursday. And I was talking to Michael at the game last night. We were at Toyota Center for Spurs Rockets, and he was telling me, he agrees it's not happening by the deadline with the Rockets, but he would not rule out the possibility this summer. And Dave, you can follow up with him on Monday if you want,
Mm.
but I think he looks at it very similarly to the way you do, in that for a lot of reasons, it doesn't make sense now. The Rockets in a perfect world want this longer window. They want the sustainable contender, but if this thing goes south, if they underperform in the playoffs, and especially if one of your big guns sort of fades under the lights for one reason or another, or perhaps, Sengun or Amen, someone like that underachieves because of, the way an opposing team chooses to defend them or the matchup or whatever the case may be, then yeah, like they're open to revisiting. We saw, the Rockets change course. They talked all last year about, loving the core seven, and after the way the Warriors series went, something clearly changed. They went for KD, but before they went for KD, there was talk at the beginning of the offseason that the Rockets were most intrigued by Giannis. And ultimately, they didn't go down that road. Giannis didn't get traded at all. They traded for KD. But I bring all that up to say it's all subject to change. And I don't think the Rockets want to do that move. I think they want to proceed with a young core. And I think just philosophically, they
Mhm.
want the window open as long as possible. So I think in a perfect world, they won't have to trade for Giannis. But depending what happens in the playoffs, depending what else happens around the NBA and what your competition looks like, I mean, if the Thunder do it again and look like a super team, I mean, maybe that's the point in which you say, hey, like just as the Rockets in the late 2010s said, let's pair James Harden, Chris Paul, and go after the Warriors. Maybe they say, let's pair up Kevin Durant and Giannis, and that's the only way you can chase down the Thunder. Like, I'm not saying for sure that's going to happen, but I think, if he doesn't get traded at the deadline, it would be foolish to rule it out.
Absolutely. I'll just say I think Sengun needs to have a good playoff showing. Rockets, hopefully, yeah, I think this dings, the injuries does ding their championship window. I'm not saying they can't do it. I mean, not window, their chances this year. I'm not saying they can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, odds. But I want to see them win a series. I want to see them make
Yes.
some noise in the playoffs. And
Yeah, if they go
I
out
think this
first
is
round again.
go
Someone
ahead.
in the chat asked about buyouts. Let's revisit that in a week. I do think that buyouts are much more likely to be the route that the Rockets pursue, because if these guys we talked about as filler salaries, Capella, and then the three injured guys, I'm including DFS in that because he's not fully available yet. If they're off limits because, the Rockets aren't going to sell them low, they're going to value them for next season and beyond. And so the value's just not going to line up to where it makes sense to deal for a guy now, especially with, the Rockets were cautious in negotiations with Tari Eason, and they would also be cautious in negotiations with Kobe White, because this team's going to be very expensive. Like a lot of the guys in the market this summer or in the market at this deadline, they're going to become free agents this summer. And so there's a level of contractual uncertainty. I don't think the Rockets are going to bid super aggressively financially. And that's another factor to consider, because this team is going to be very expensive. So if you're comparing a Kobe White, who's about to be an unrestricted free agent, to guys who are on friendly contracts like DFS, like Fred, like Steven Adams, I mean, that's another reason to sort of to stay the course. And so if you take all of them out of play and you're just looking primarily at guys making closer to the minimum, and, at that point, you're looking sort of bottom of the barrel moves at the margins, and the Rockets can't really aggregate salaries because they're hard capped at the first apron. The likely scenario, in my opinion, is that you just wait until after the deadline and you get someone via the buyout market. And I don't
Yeah.
want to speculate on who that is yet, because we don't know who's going to get traded and who isn't. But I do think that conceptually, the buyout market is likely to be where the Rockets go for a player of that stature. And as far as who that is, we can talk about that in a week once the deadline passes.
Yeah. Looney is who I have my eyes on, but we'll see how that plays out. Appreciate you, Ben. Please follow if you don't already follow Ben, follow him on Blue Sky, on Twitter at Ben DuBose, possibly on Instagram too. I'm not sure if that's your handle there, Ben. But appreciate everybody for tuning in tonight to the post game. You can obviously find it here on ClutchFans YouTube, also on the Rockets Launch Pod. Ben has the audio up on that podcast as well. So appreciate all of you. We will see you all Saturday night when the Rockets take on the Dallas Mavericks. Thanks, everyone.